Welcome to Linda's Corner. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about creating cultures of inclusion, resilience, and thriving. I'm excited to welcome special guest Kiran Gaind. Kiran has a master's degree in organization development. She's a teacher, life coach, mom, speaker, and writer. Her work has been published in the Huffington Post and Thrive Global, and she's also writing her first book and preparing her first TED Talk. You can reach Kiran at Once Hub, and I'll include a link in the description. Welcome. I'm so glad you could be here with me today.
Me too. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Linda.
I am so excited. You have done so many amazing things, and you're in the process of doing so many amazing things. But is it okay if we start with your story, with why you're doing what you're doing and why it's important to you?
Absolutely. And thank you for that question. I think it's important for all of us to return to this question again and again. But for me, my work right now focuses on creating culture of inclusion and belonging, and looking at the mindset and the interactions that we have as leaders. And parents, we're leaders; educators, we're leaders; in the workplace, we're leaders. And I think how we treat people, how we interact with them, is really what defines us as leaders, as parents, and as teachers. And I grew up, my story began when I was born into a family of immigrants, and both my parents come from different cultures. My father was born and raised in India, in northern India. And my mother was born and raised on a small island up off the north coast of Scotland in the Orkney Islands in the North Sea. So they couldn't have come from more different worlds. And being the child of two such totally different people from different ends of the earth and different cultures, I think that, like many people we've seen in our culture, both politically and otherwise, who are bicultural or biracial, I think that, that experience really teaches you it taught me from the moment I was born to really understand difference, to bridge difference, to see in myself that I was a collection of diverse backgrounds all inside of me. And to love both my parents as much as I have always, and to always see them as equal, to see different people as equal, to see that I think difference can be very rich and very fulfilling and very interesting and educational, and just it's a thing of love, so that's where I came from. And it wasn't always easy. I think in my own background, people don't always understand. I think that in some ways we're creatures of, comfort and familiarity. So to be from a background where there's just so much difference, it depends. People can either be very intrigued and interested in that, but I think it can also spark some feelings of just discomfort, and so I've had to navigate that throughout my life, and just feel, though, regardless of how others react, that to feel secure and confident in my own self, and who I am and where I come from. And so I think in doing that and the work I do, and then when I taught, I worked in environments that I think took me out of my comfort zone into lower resource communities with cultures that I didn't always know that intimately, and to really reach beyond my own sense of what I knew to understand other people. So I think I've always tried that. I've always tried to be open-minded and to be curious about others, and to be ultimately just loving, that people are doing the best they can, and they want to be understood, and they want to be cared for.
And that's a universal thing. Everybody wants that. I loved how you brought about the idea that it comes from a place of discomfort. And when we feel uncomfortable, then we have maybe a response. And so if we're comfortable with ourselves, then it's easier. And I also love that you said there are a couple of possibilities where you can look at someone and say, oh, wow, this is new, this is different, this is awesome, teach me. or it can be, oh, this is different, so that means it's weird. And there's a little choice that goes on. I think sometimes we're in kind of a reflex mode, and we forget that there's a choice of how to respond when we see something that's a little different.
Linda. Yeah, and we all have those choices. And imagine the world our kids growing up in, they have those choices every day. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
it's just being human, right? We always have these choices being human.
Well,
So
you've done amazing things, and I know you've taught in school, and so I want to talk about creating these wonderful cultures of inclusion and talking about how to do it in our homes and how parenting is a leadership role. That's not only something that is in, a career or a community type situation, and also schools. So as we go through each of these, but I think you have a foundation that works for all of them, and that is your care. Your care. So can we talk about care, that 4-pillar plan?
yeah, sure. So I developed this method looking at sort of brain science, looking at the research that I've done in my work and org development as well as my years of teaching. And really what it is I think of it as a way of helping people transform the way they think and the way they show up. And so whether you're a parent, an educator, workplace leader, my care 4-pillar method, it starts out by saying, no matter what's going on, even when you come to me and you're having a challenge with behavior or something, you care. I believe that we all care, right? But that initial state of care is often taking the form of what I call conventional care. And so in conventional care, the letters of care are standing for 4 things. And so in conventional care, the C stands for compliance, to usually kind of an external ideal of success or of whatever, fill in the blank. It's just this external thing that we're carrying in our minds, that we're comparing what's happening with our child, with our student, with our employee to this external kind of concept. So that's compliance. And then the A of conventional care stands for anxiety. That often this kind of comparative type of thing that we're doing in this conventional care, it creates anxiety, which means the mind is sort of living in the future. And anxiety is on the rise. It is for many, many reasons. I think social media plays into it, but it tends to be about futuristic place as opposed to being present. And then the R stands for reactivity, which is about our egos kind of reacting to control, image control sort of activity. And then the E stands for entitlement. And I do a lot of work in more this nowadays kind of affluent communities, and I think in parenting in general, there can just be this entitlement culture in this original state of being conventional care. So what I do in my coaching work, give people all the information, do some coaching, and then we transform from this state of conventional care to what I call true care. In true care, the letters of care stand for what we want, which the C stands for connection. So we move from compliance to connection. We drop all those ideals, and instead we just look at who we have right here. Who is my child? Who is my student? Who is my employee? Who is my spouse? And I'm just going to connect with them just as they are, because they're good and whole as they are. The A in true care stands for authenticity. We're going to show up, be authentic, bring our whole selves, tell our stories. The R in true care stands for responsiveness. So it's not so much about control and reactivity, but more about understanding needs and meeting those needs by being responsive.
Okay, tell me more about responsive, because my brain is thinking kind of like the react and response are the same, but they're very different. So will you help me clarify?
Thank you for that clarification. So I would say oftentimes, let's say in parenting, when let's say there's some behavior that a kid's doing, it could, it's aggravating us. It's a behavior getting our attention, whining, doing something that we feel is negative, and we can react to try to kind of clamp it out and just shut it down and just make it stop. But often what's going on, I mean, not just often, often, I would say always, there's something going on that's causing that behavior. There's a need that that person has, whether it's a need for connection. I'd say 95% of the time with kids, it's a need for connection. Their brains are wired for connection. So if we interpret their behavior not so much as bad, but as a need for connection, the way we will respond to that is going to be really different from reacting to control it or shut it down. It's going to be, well, if they need a connection, how could I fulfill that need for connection? Maybe I need to put my phone away, carve a few minutes out of my day, and just spend some one-on-one time with my child and kind of fill up their need for connection. And in doing that, I'm going to see a change in the behavior that they have. Same within the classroom. You've got a kid yelling out, you've got a kid, doing things that are not desirable, but maybe they have something going on at home that's really disturbing and troubling them. And as a teacher or a principal or whoever, if I can take the time outside of class to just pause in the hallway and pull the kid aside and say, they have a baseball game later today. I'm going to come and watch you play baseball, and I'm going to take an interest in you. I'm going to maybe call home, see what's going on. Just do something to boost that relationship so that the need the child has just to be understood and for someone to see them, to see what they're really struggling with, as opposed to just punishing. Then the child, I think, feels that someone cares and that they care that there's something difficult going on for them. So being responsive is about that. I think ultimately being responsive is about compassion. It's about being present. It's about, instead of sort of knee-jerk reacting to something that makes us feel that, oh, this is annoying, this isn't what I want, we're going to dig a little deeper. And we're going to say, why is this happening? Why is this person behaving this way? Maybe once I understand that, I can respond in a way that's actually going to get at the root need that they have.
And I think this, pardon me, this seems a little bit like it goes back to that making a choice, where it's so easy to go on autopilot. And when this happens, then I respond. I kind of do this knee-jerk versus this happened, and now I'm going to choose a response. I'm going to move from the subconscious to my conscious thinking. I'm going to pause, and I'm going to, instead of just responding, just, okay, let's think about why. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
I think react involves, to your point, what you're saying, it's not as much thought or reflection is behind it. We're just kind of going with that thing that our automatic sort of reaction. But response means we're going to pause, we're going to take it in, and we're going to kind of look a little between the lines and say, well, how could I respond differently? And, sometimes, I'm not going to say this is possible all the time, but I often teach parents that it's when we've cared for ourselves, we've responded to ourselves, we've gotten enough rest, we are well nourished and hydrated and all the things we need. I think then we are much more likely to be able to do that for someone else. If, it's just basic stuff about self-care. We really need that if we're going to be available to respond.
I agree.
So
100%.
it's difficult, right? Because we have so much on our plates, but
for sure.
Pays off. It pays off, right?
Even if you can spend just a few minutes in the morning and the evening. But it's so interesting, as I've had the privilege of speaking with different people from around the world with different professions. And we talk about marriage, and we talk about children, and we talk about this, and we talk about that. That is one consistent key, that if we are not in a good place ourselves, then we have that tendency to just, react rather than responding, as you put it. That, like the little airplane analogy where you ride and they give you that safety briefing and they say, okay, if we need an emergency thing and we have to have oxygen, you've got to do yours before you do someone else, because you're just not in a position. We don't respond very well when we're not in a good place.
It's such a good mirror, right? I think for our own self-care. And ultimately, we could say and do all the things we want in the world, but what really teaches kids is what we're doing and what they see, right? So if we're taking care of ourselves, I think they are seeing that and they're learning. And So,
Right.
we all do the best that we can.
And we
It's
don't
not about perfect.
we
Yeah.
don't just teach with our words. Some people think teaching is words. Some people think teaching is lecturing, which is not. But teaching is they watch, they observe. We're mentors. We it's like, oh, this is whatever. And whatever we grow up with is totally normal. It's like, oh, that's normal. And then maybe you find out that normal is not good or not bad, whatever. Anyway, we didn't make it all the way to the end of the word. We still need our E.
I was like, is there one more?
Yeah.
The last one is the E in the true care state of being. It's empathy. So we're moving from entitlement to empathy. And so I am in a community now, interestingly enough, all my teaching had been in more like Title I kind of communities. And then where I'm living now and raising my kids, it's in a very different kind of community where I'd say it's very high, like high achieving, everything is about,
right.
It's a competitive
I was
kind
gonna
of
say competitive.
and I think it's great, the opportunities for all kids that are here, but I think there's this piece of it that can become very much about success at all costs, and that entitlement culture, like my kid has to be the best no matter what, and I've seen a real need for emphasizing empathy, both between the parent and the child, and I think also just teaching empathy for others who maybe don't have so much privilege, don't have these set of priorities that, and we've seen our society over the last several years, there is such a need for empathy. I think just for seeing that there are so many different ways that people are trying to live their lives, and nobody's bad, nobody's worse, or no one's better than anyone else. It's just different scenarios. And I think to teach children that these days, to teach people that in organizational cultures, school cultures, family cultures, I think it can be a challenge, but I personally think it goes a very long way, because it makes us as leaders pause and think about, am I being empathetic? Am I responding to some scenario by showing empathy, real empathy? And in doing that, am I then teaching the child or the student or the employee, that this is a value that we hold here in this culture? I think that's the only way that we really can have that value present, is if we're demonstrating it,
So is that the key?
I also,
Is the key as a leader that you are demonstrating these qualities, and then that kind of creates an example so that the students can follow along, and or kids, whatever scenario, whether you're in school or home or business or whatever. Okay.
That's what it's about. And I think it's also, then it can extend from there beyond your own behavior and modeling to intentional types of activities and structures and practices. And in my coaching programs, I sort of teach the background behind these shifts and these principles, like connection, authenticity, responsiveness, and empathy. And then those create the backbone for the kinds of practices and structures and rituals that I teach my clients to incorporate. And I can tell you as much of that as you would like, but it's like, for instance, for empathy, I think it's partly who you are, how you model it, but also getting kids involved in like community service, getting employees involved in community service. Those kinds of intentional actions and activities are how we really cultivate this. For the connection piece, having one-on-one carved out interaction time with each child, or as a manager with each of your direct reports, having like a designated weekly time where you're just with that one person, and there's a certain way that time flows, certain things you do and don't do, that you're really being present and you're really listening, you're really creating a safe space for people one-on-one. I mean, that's a very important tool for, regardless of whether it's school, home, or work. It works, it's very effective. Having family meetings, effective team meetings, effective, team at home, work, or school. That's another really important tool for the authenticity piece. And then for the responsiveness, having a mindfulness practice. Those kinds of practices can be hugely beneficial and help us to be able to see the present clearly and see what's really going on for people, as opposed to what might be kind of running through our minds on a regular day without mindfulness practice. So, there's very specific ways we can become more of these qualities by practicing.
And I appreciate that you give some specifics, because it's helpful. I think it requires some education and then some application in order to be able to make these things work. Because, just an ideal is not enough. And so I love that. So you mentioned family meetings and whatever. What would a good family meeting look like to you? What would you recommend?
I think family meetings are so important. And I would suggest once a week that, like at dinner on Sundays, you have a family meeting and that you have a rhythm for the meeting. So in my family, the way we do family meetings, we always start with appreciations. So we go around and everyone appreciates each other for something really specific. Thanks for unloading the dishwasher this week. Thanks for walking the dog. Thanks for doing your homework, whatever it was. And then that sort of sets the tone. It sets this very positive tone. And I think in organizational life, family life, school life, people want to feel appreciated.
Oh, definitely.
When you start off that way, people light up, and they pay attention. I think they get more engaged. They want whatever's coming after that. They're much more likely to pay attention, to want to do their best, and it's genuine. It's not just fluffy stuff. I mean, it's like, I think it's also motivating, so that if kids, students, workplace employees know that someone's going to acknowledge their great work and appreciate them, then I think week after week, they're going to be like, when no one's watching, you're more likely to do the right thing because you know that someone will notice and will at least kind of give you that little pat on the back. And I think we all do respond to that. We're motivated by that.
I do. And I appreciate that you mentioned this as a work thing as well. We're talking about family and work, and I love it because I love when things apply to both. Yeah. But I think sometimes in a work scenario, people think that your paycheck is the reward and that nobody has to give anything beyond that. It's just about money. But I know every person that I know wants to be appreciated. I can't think of anyone who doesn't. And the idea that it's beyond money, that what I'm doing matters, that it matters to you, that someone appreciated that positive work environment. And, I have friends who struggle with ulcers because their work environment is not positive. It's horrible. And so it creates health issues as well as, work issues. So I love the idea of creating a culture where appreciation is a big thing and how that can be used in the family. I love that. What a beautiful thing that you're doing. I have a friend who once, she said her daughter came, and a teenager, and she was so mad. She said, I cleaned out the dishwasher and you didn't even notice and you didn't even thank me. And her mom, and it was just a knee-jerk, because we all have knee-jerk reaction. She said, I didn't thank you. How many things do I do that you don't thank me for? We don't get thanked in life, and you need to get used to not being thanked. And as she was sharing this story with me and hoping for compassion, and my heart was going, you just missed a teaching opportunity. I would have said, oh, I'm so sorry. I do appreciate it so much. And how did it feel when you didn't feel appreciated? And what do you think? And what I do things that don't get appreciated. And how do you think that makes me feel? But that same scenario could be used as a teaching opportunity rather than I'm not getting it, so you shouldn't get it either. And it's easy to do in that reaction. It's just easy to do.
I think it's kind of coming from a place of more like lack as opposed to a place of abundance. And
for sure.
and it's easy, we're human, and there are going to be times where these mistakes get made. And I also think it's really important whether it's during a family meeting or during those moments when we make those mistakes, to, once we've gotten our composure, to apologize and to acknowledge those kinds of mistakes, because modeling that, it's a recovery, and we're repairing and healing from that, because all relationships, whether it's a spousal, child, parent, work, whatever, there's going to be rupture sometimes. And I think we have to model repair so that there's a humanness around, like, we can admit when we are fallible, but we're going to work to improve and to heal, so that we're modeling that relationships are resilient, that we're resilient, that we can do better,
Definitely.
And in these family meetings, I think after those appreciations, we do get pretty nuts and bolts about just things we have to problem solving. So I think problem solving skills, like any meeting, whether the whole point of calling a meeting for a team, for a family, for whoever, is that you have work to do, you have something tangible. So set the tone with the appreciations, but then dig into, we got to figure this thing out this week. I've noticed that the siblings, you guys are kind of getting into it a lot this week. Can we talk about that? Let's we're going to spend some time just talking about this, trying to figure it out. Why is this happening? What can we do differently? What does everyone need? And then what can we commit to? So for the next week, we're going to each just do one thing and try to commit to that, so that next week when we meet, we can check in and say, well, how is that going? And it could be about all kinds of topics in the family. We've had family meetings where we talk about, how can we get up on time in the morning? How can we make sure we're getting to bed on time? How can we make sure dogs are getting walked? How can we make sure the siblings are getting along? How can we make sure, hey, we have a family trip coming up, and mom and dad love planning, but we really want you guys to plan some of this trip so you are excited. So why don't you guys help this week, do some research and get involved? So it's fun, so there's sometimes kind of problem-y, not so fun stuff going on, but we can put our heads together, problem solve. Sometimes it's just fun adventure stuff. Sometimes it's, oh, you guys need to do the dishes, not so fun, whatever. But it's a range of things, because this is family. Family is about all of this. Right. And it's not always so, sexy, interesting, whatever, but it's life. This is what has to happen. And it's more fun, I think, and more interesting when we're all in it together, So I think the family meeting is really about that. It's like, we're going to appreciate, we're going to roll up our sleeves, we're going to make commitments, we're going to hold each other accountable, and we're mostly just going to have this attitude that, like, this is our family. We're in this together. It's not just about mom and dad. It's not just about the kids. It's about us, like, working together. And I just love it. I think it, my kids sometimes will roll family meeting, do we have to do it? They don't always want to do it, but I think once we're started and we're in it, they always get something out of it. And they think we leave the meeting, tech is a big one now. We have to, we have the tech contracts and tech agreements and this screen time. That comes up a lot in these meetings. And, maybe sometimes also about, like, nutrition or meal planning or, whatever. These kinds of issues tend to surface a lot in my family.
Do you typically lead the meeting? Do you have kind of an agenda, like, I want to cover this and this and this topic? And then do you have it regularly, weekly, so that it's like, okay, at this time, on this day, we're going to meet? So that, I think if you created, like you said, a culture, a structure where this is the thing. Some families, they have an occasional meeting once in a while, and it's so long and awful and boring that they don't ever want to do that again.
Do it again. And I would say weekly for when kids are little, like really little. I started doing this when my kids were pretty 4 or 5 years old, but they would be like 15 minutes, because kids that little, they can't do more than that. They don't have the attention span, and it would be just painful, But I think as they grow older, their attention spans increase and their desire for responsibility increases. And like now I have a 12 and a 9-year-old. We probably do about 30 to 40 minutes at these meetings. We don't usually go more than that.
How do you know when you're done?
you can kind of tell. I know from my teaching days, you could just tell when people started to get antsy. I think and we don't always
watch
lead.
the body language.
You gotta watch the body language. Watch when they're just, squirming, their heads are going down. I think, and to your question about leading it, all of us now know the rhythm enough that any of us could probably kick it off. And we tend to just go around in a circle and no one's doing all the talking.
Oh, good.
And if you have a family where maybe one person really likes to talk and one person doesn't like to talk at all, one idea might be to use a little timer and just say everyone's got like a minute to do this, and you give equal time to everyone. Those kinds of tools can be really helpful to balance the voice out, in the meeting.
So do the kids bring up issues or questions or concerns or complaints or whatever?
Yeah, they have. And they might want it to be like, anything from, we want to talk about the family menu this week. My kids tend to care a lot about that. Or we want to...
good food, good life.
Something about, food is important. And usually we'll let them, if they have something to add to before we launch in, we'll say, this is what we were thinking we would do today. Does anyone have anything to add to this, or is something you want to change? And they can do that. They're allowed to do that. And it's, we're not too serious. Like, we tend to do some things in the moment. We just want it to be a space where everyone feels heard and where the kids feel that we're paying attention, that they have a place to bring their best selves, and I think different families have different experiences of this, but for us, it just helps us also feel more organized, because we'll also maybe get out the calendars, look at the week, what's the plan this week, when do you have soccer, when do you have this, just so everyone's kind of on the same page and it doesn't feel so chaotic, once the week is going. Stuff like that. Very practical
brilliant
stuff.
What a fantastic thing that you're doing, and how lovely that your children are growing up with that opportunity of feeling heard and that they matter. And I think there are different ways to do this. You're having this weekly and consistent and having a plan is beautiful. I remember one of my kids, they were at some meeting, whatever thing, and they were calling it a family council, having a family meeting, and he came home feeling so dejected. He said, we don't have a family council thing. And then we talked about it. We said, well, we don't have a formal family council, but all of those things that you're talking about that we need to cover, that he was talking about, I said, this is what we do when we're having family dinner together, is we talk about our scheduling and what our needs. It's not formal, it's informal, but that's where it's taking place. And then his face lit up. It's like, oh, we are doing it. We're okay then? And it's like, yep, we're okay. We're okay. And yes, that kind of structure worked better for our family. My husband doesn't do structure very well, so.
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing that up, because when I work with my clients as a family coach or any other kind of coaching that I do, you meet people where you are, and there are suggestions, there are structures, and we do our best. But if that's not going to totally fly with someone, you don't want it to be, like, to your point, a source of feeling whatever, the imposter stuff that can crop up for people. You just want it to be a launching pad, and then you adjust it and you make it flexible to what people need. And I love that you're bringing that up, because the most important thing is not the what, it's the what do you want to feel, and what people want to feel is heard, right? And they want to feel connected. So do whatever you need to do so that is the result. And I think you've got to kind of go with the flow, go with where people are, and work with people, right? And
I love that you're doing this with families, because a lot of times we get our focus on work and on all the things that we need to do. And sometimes we just think the kids are okay. They're fine. I took them to soccer practice. I got them where they needed to go. And that's not enough. Kids need to feel heard, and they need to feel that connection, and they need that time. So thank you for your example. Thank you for what you're teaching. Thank you for what you're sharing, and for the wonderful things that you have done. And thank you for visiting with me today.
Oh, my pleasure, Linda. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote by American author and activist Verna Myers. She said, "Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance." Today, I invite parents, teachers, and leaders to help create a culture where everyone is asked to dance. See you next time on Linda's Corner.